Oh, it's a huge misconception to only think that you can only do what you do. But I think a lot of people fall into that trap, myself included. I did have a lot of doubts back then because I was worried, about, I'm at this, big name and nobody leaves the big name. When I was talking to people about it, they would say, no, that's not a good idea. Why would you do that? You have to trust your gut, really, and you have to trust your instinct. And it's something that I'd felt, and it's something that I'd felt for enough time for me to then eventually make that decision.
Let's go.
Hi everyone, my name is Varia and this is Shameless Careers, a podcast about finding a career you're passionate about. As always, I would really appreciate it if you liked or commented on this episode. It really helps me grow a community of people who want to find a career they love. Today, my guest is Kenzy Goodwin. Kenzy was a senior equity trader at a large international asset management firm where she spent almost 20 years. But after that, Kenzy decided to pivot towards something that she loves more. Kenzy is now a managing partner at Fintechs, where she helps fintech firms increase their revenues and expand their businesses. So, Kenzy, thank you so much for being here with me. Can't wait to ask you all the questions about what it was like to leave such a big corporate behind, how did you find what you're passionate about, and also I would love to touch upon the impact of AI on careers, because obviously this is something that you have seen firsthand in your previous role, but also something that you're seeing among startups that you're working with. So let's touch upon that important topic too.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's wonderful to be here.
So let's start from the very beginning. You started and had an extensive career in asset management space for 20 years. Can you tell me what originally attracted you to the space and how was your experience?
Yes, so 20 years, as you can imagine, is quite a long time in finance, particularly in equity trading as well. But let's start with the first part of your question, what originally attracted me to the role. And I think it was quite simple, really. I was very young. I just graduated from university. I wanted trading, looked fun, looked exciting. It was the late 90s. There's loads of energy in the room, loads of decisions being made at a very fast pace. And ultimately it was that energy, it was the team spirit. And that's what attracted me to the role. In terms of the particular type of firm, because I think that's quite closely related to the role, because that type of role varies quite dramatically depending on which type of firm you're working for. And I was keen to be part of a large team. I was keen to be part of quite a sophisticated organisation. I was fortunate to have that opportunity, and I feel quite privileged to have had that opportunity. But it was also because at the time, I was very aware that I had a lot to learn. When I did a degree, it wasn't a vocational degree. I did maths at UCL, so I could have done really, it doesn't necessarily prepare you for a specific type of career. At the time, I was quite unexposed to the city as well, and I was aware that I had a lot to learn. So I wanted to be in a place where I was working with lots of professional, successful people from which I could learn ultimately and build those skill sets that I needed.
And how did your experience evolve over time? And at which point did you start realizing that, okay, maybe something is missing and maybe I should consider changing?
Yes, so that's a good question, actually, because there 20 years in the city, we've obviously seen a few cycles. And the first cycle for me was quite fast, actually, because that was just after, 2001. Clearly there were lots of changes back then with the internet sector changing quite dramatically. So that was the first cycle, and then the second one that I saw, which was massive, which was obviously the credit crisis in 2008, and at both those times it went through my head, is this really the right thing to do? Because it was quite dramatic. It had a dramatic impact on the team, had dramatic impact on the business. I saw a lot of people around me, 1 minute they were there, the next minute later they weren't working anymore. I wasn't sure if, I was still sort of very green to these things. But actually, those situations and those events are huge educational opportunities. So I very much wanted to seize that, and I felt I'd learned a lot once I'd been through that phase, because you understand then how the business changes, how the business pivots. Clearly, for the particular financial institution I was working for, we saw some mergers, we saw some takeovers, and we saw the impact that had on the business. It was all very positive. And you see what people do in order to survive. So you see what people do to survive, and you see what businesses do to survive, and they're extremely important learnings. And then to answer your question around what was it? Evolvement.
Around at which point did you feel like, okay, maybe it's not as fulfilling anymore? When did you understand that?
Yes, so I think that happened probably a few years, just probably a few years before I left, because again, it was also a reflection of how the business was changing and how the team was changing, and my specific role was also changing, because we had an introduction of technology, we had the introduction of regulation was far more influential over the role, technology was far more influential over the role, particularly post-crisis. They were turning points, but it was always a consistent theme, the effect of technology and regulation on the role. And so I think it was quite gradual. I can't pinpoint a specific event. It was quite gradual, and I suspect what I must have done at the time, but without it being necessarily sort of on my conscious mind. It was something I was doing without realizing. I wanted to sort of expand my network, because back then we were sort of quite siloed in trading. And the investment team. And I was fortunate in that there were lots of opportunities whereby I could experience different things at the firm. And what I mean by that, for example, there were internal networks where I was able to take leadership roles. There were programs that we were running that, again, where I was able to take leadership roles. So, for example, we had a very strong women's initiative network, and I served in a number of roles there. One of them specifically being around a program that we had put together for the female employees who were very much at that mid-level stage in their career. And it was very much targeting the women that had already consolidated the hard skills that they needed for their role, and what they were looking to do was to acquire the softer skills that they needed in order to be able to advance in their careers.
So it sounds like, based on what you said, over time you have seen the impact of technology regulation on your role, but also you wanted to take charge and have some leadership role around shaping something which you could kind of express in the initiative that you talked about, right? Would it be fair to say?
Yes, yes. I think that's exactly fair to say, because equity trading is a fantastic job, and it's extremely rewarding. You're very close to the markets. You make some wonderful connections within the broking community, but at the same time, because of the nature of the role, you don't necessarily have the opportunity to explore different areas of your skill sets that you could build and that you can grow. So it's a rewarding job, but it's for a very specific type of skill set. Yeah.
Right. And interesting on that, do you feel like you were more kind of an outlier in this respect, or were like generally people in those roles quite happy to do specialized roles? Or do you also feel, especially after you left, did you hear some colleagues reaching out to you and asking, okay, I also don't want to be a narrow specialist, also want to explore something else? Like, what have you observed in this respect?
is a whole mixture. I mean, I do have some colleagues who were extremely happy to be. They were passionate about what they were doing, and that's all they wanted to do. So I do have some colleagues that were like that. But again, also, I saw even my former colleagues that had left before me, for example, going off and doing completely different things to what they were doing in the city, and they were able to transcend into completely different roles, use those skills that they'd built whilst they were working, the networks that they'd built whilst they were working, and then applying them to new roles. And when I say new roles, and just maybe to put a bit more detail around that so it makes more sense, it's anything from running your own business, like that. Some of my former colleagues have been running their own businesses. Others, in fact, did the same role, but at a different firm, which required them, there was a jump, there was a gap that they would have to bridge, in order to do that. When I personally left, what I felt, and I don't know if it's unique to the firm that I used to work for, but I felt there was almost this sort of alumni network that was quite informal, alumni network that was quite strong, supportive, and very helpful. So if I reached out to others, they were always very supportive, and I would always reciprocate as well. And I think when you leave a big corporate and you go into an entrepreneurial role, you find you attract a lot of people from different walks of life. And a lot of my ex-colleagues have contacted me to sort of understand more about the process. It's always the people that you don't expect to contact you. They're the ones that contact you, if that makes sense.
Can you tell me a bit more? You've touched upon the impact of technology on the role. Can you tell me what did it look like in practice and how did it make you feel about your role? Because obviously this is such a huge topic right now with artificial intelligence. I'm sure more and more people will see the impact of these technologies on what they do. So it would be great to hear what was your experience with this.
Yeah, I think my former employer was very strategic about the way they approached how we use technology and how we applied it in our roles, and I see that approach now at Fincellate with the Fintechs that are coming to us, because it's also something I'm actually doing now in the city. But to answer your question more specifically, what I would say is we were using the technology that was available to us, and we were applying it to our roles to get rid of the more mundane tasks that you shouldn't necessarily have someone doing if they could be automated, because they would be automated, then obviously there would be no mistakes, it would be a lot more cost effective to have them automated. So that was very much the approach, was use technology to replace the more automated to replace those manual processes which are not that exciting to do, and then giving the individuals, the team members, space where they can do more cognitively demanding tasks. So that was kind of the first stage, I think, where technology came in, and now it's kind of like bringing the AI piece as well. It's more about bringing the technology in and bringing the people in and actually getting them to work together.
So overall, did you feel like this experience of the technology on your role, was it positive, and did it make you feel more fulfilled about what you do, about these more challenging tasks? Or did you feel like some parts of the process and the job that you enjoyed actually were missing and were kind of going as well?
Yeah, so yes and no. I think the fact that I definitely saw mundane tasks being taken away by technology, I thought that was huge, and for me that worked really well. Because on a personal level, I didn't feel like it was necessary for a person to do those tasks if technology could essentially replace those manual processes. And then the other thing was I felt it then did. But also what I enjoyed is I felt that I was part of the process of having that impact. So you would think of ways that the technology could obviously streamline your processes a lot more and so on. And so being part of that process was also quite important, because I think if you're not part of that process, then you feel you didn't have a great feeling about going into work, right? Because you think, oh, somebody's taking my job away from me. But if you're part of that process, then you feel like you've got to, you're improving things, and then you can see the tangible results, right? So you're part of the process and you see the tangible results at the end. So I think that was very important. Like, I remember one of my previous mentors always said to me, your motto should be almost, how do you make yourself redundant, right? Because it's like, well, if you're doing a role which can be automated and cleaned up, then you shouldn't be doing that, right? And you should be having an impact on those processes by making them more automated instead of hanging on to it. So you almost want to make yourself redundant. That's how you can improve in your role.
Right, yeah. So
or improve in your career, not necessarily that specific role. Yeah.
And that's, I guess, the advice to people who are seeing the impact on technology of their roles, is to try to be this person who is onboarding and managing these technologies within their day-to-day, so that this technology doesn't catch them off guard and make their jobs redundant, right?
Yeah, I mean, you want to take charge of the situation. You want to take responsibility of the situation, right? That's what you want to do. And then if you're everybody knows how to do their specific role in their specific company, so they're the best people to collaborate and come together to understand how they can use a technology to improve all those processes.
Right. And can you tell me, so how did you find the role that you are in right now? Can you tell me about the company, your role, and how did you know that this is something that you want to do instead of trading?
Yeah, it was a process. It wasn't quite that simple. It was a process. So if I just it was interesting. I mean, I probably took some time when I was at my previous employer, and like really dedicating the time to working out what was important to me and what I wanted to do next. Because I think it takes time to think about that. You're very lucky, I guess, if the answer just immediately lands in your lap, but it didn't for me. I had to have a lot of conversations with very different people in order for me to get it straight in my head. And I don't think I had the answer after all of that. I think I had an idea.
And what was this idea?
Yes. And so so all of those things that I was doing in a previous role, and where I was seeing technology and regulation impact my sort of previous role, I felt that the fintech industry is a really interesting sector. It's it's growing, it's innovative. It's almost like what financial services is in that it's a genuine meritocracy. So that's what financial services almost used to be when I first started, and that's what I felt the fintech sector was, and because it was grassroots, so it was still quite early, it was still quite new, so it was really exciting that people are working together, and their entire focus is how to expand and how to grow, and the best way to do that. And you would often see entrepreneurs, founders, and they were fearless in their approach. And I thought, yeah, that's exciting. And then what they're focusing on is valuable. So there's less the I know it's a bit cliche, but obviously at the larger corporates, clearly, there's always a bit of politics and so on and so forth, and it's very distracting from your role. It's part of your role when you're at a corporate, and there's nothing you can do about it, but it also does distract away from what you feel is the real business, and I wanted to be a lot closer to that. So when I left and I joined FinTech sort of not long afterwards, because I had met with the partners and the founders, and I loved what they were doing. So basically what they were doing is, we were all former traders, by the way. So we all worked at financial institutions sort of beforehand. So we sort of navigated that space. We built up networks and so on and so forth. And then we were having fintechs come in to pitch to us, telling us what they were doing. We would sort of give them advice around their strategy and so on and so forth. And then where the fintech really sat quite nicely with us, as it were, if we really liked the client, we would then sign them on. The client would then hire us, and we would basically help them grow their sales and revenue pipeline. And so it's very much what we do at FinTech is very much about the commercial engagement. So the fintechs come to us, and where it works and where we get excited about what they're doing, we then work with them to increase the impact of that commercial engagement within financial markets. And then with financial institutions, clearly there's loads of fintechs that are out there, and what you really want to find is that real gem, because they're out there, but there are others that are less gem-like as well. And what you really need is that filter. And so that's what we pride ourselves on at FinTech, is being that fintech filter, where we'll go out and we'll find that sort of real gem. And there are and some of the fintechs that we're working with, I mean, they're phenomenal, and we've sort of seen their growth from the early years to now, and they've been, their success has been phenomenal, and it's been a real pleasure and a real privilege as well to work with them.
And what would you say are the biggest differences between your role now and your previous role?
So there are big differences. When you're at a corporate and you call someone and you say, I'm from tier 1 financial institution, they always give you the time of day, no matter what you're doing around there, right? You always get the time of day. And when you leave and then you call from FinTech, which isn't necessarily a name that everybody's heard of, not many people that have heard of, the big tier 1s, clearly, then you have to work hard to make sure that people give you the time that you want. And so that was an important part of the important journey. The other thing is obviously looking at fintechs, looking at founders, understanding their businesses, understanding what their strategy is, and does this really work? And going out, speaking to certain members of my network to sort of test the water, and that whole process. I mean, that was also quite new to me, because it was very different. Because coming from a trading background, some of the fintechs that we work with are relevant to trading teams, investment teams, but also the regulation space is huge still, and there's a lot of budget being allocated still to regulation technology, and so I have also had to expand my network and understand how to expand my network as well relative to before, in terms of navigating some of these huge financial institutions on behalf of our fintechs. And that's another skill that I had to acquire quickly. And then also just going through, how it is when you're in these big corporates, because you do your role, and your role to a level is very important, but you operate sort of within a certain space. And when you're in a smaller organization and you're basically one of the main decision makers, you have to think about the world differently, and you have to think about the world. You have to be broader, but with that breadth, you also have to be a lot more detailed, right? So, I mean, for example, in my previous role in trading, we only had to know about compliance when it overlapped with what we were doing in trading. And there were regs and so on that were in place that were not relevant to our role, that we didn't necessarily need to know about. It was more of it's interesting, but it's not relevant. Whereas now, in order to speak to financial institutions about those specific regulation technologies, you have to have a much deeper understanding of what the rules are.
Right. So you need to be much more generalist, but at the same time still know what you're talking about on this on these different topics.
Yes.
And does it feel like looking back and taking stock of your experience back then and when you decided to move and what you're doing right now? Do you find what you're doing now more fulfilling, and what advice would you give to people who are on the fence whether to change careers or not?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's not quite as black and white as it's more fulfilling, my role now. It is very fulfilling, but I would also say sort of my previous role was fulfilling for me at that particular stage in life. And I think for me, but this is a personal thing to me, I think I got to a certain point where that previous role didn't suit me and wasn't fulfilling for me, and my role now is extremely fulfilling. You know, I love going to the office, and I love meeting entrepreneurs. I love the energy that they have. And I think it's fascinating, you know, when I look at our clients and I see what some of them have achieved. I mean, there's one of our clients, 7 years old, and it's a regulation technology. They've approached it in, an extremely commercial way. And they've built up a client base of 170 clients in that, in the space of 7 years, which is phenomenal. Obviously, they work with us, and we've obviously helped them do that, and we've been a big part of that. But it's phenomenal. But they are also exceptional in what they've achieved, and it's been a real pleasure working with them.
And if you look back to this moment when you were making the switch, what doubts did you have back then, and what would you say to yourself back in the moment about these doubts from the position where you are at right now?
I mean, look, so I did have a lot of doubts back then, because I was worried, you know, about I'm at this, you know, big name, and nobody leaves the big name, you know, because there are people there that have been there for ages, and when they leave, they only go and work for another big name, you know, and why is it that no one else goes off and does what I'm doing? I've seen some examples, but I hadn't seen many examples of someone sort of making the move that I'd made. And so when you're going somewhere that you've not seen someone else go before, like, so you're doing the journey, and you can't see in front of you, it's a little bit uncomfortable. And then when I was talking to people about it, they would say, no, that's not a good idea. Why would you do that? You know, so, but I knew deep down I wanted to. I like the team, you know, the team at FinTech. They're a good team. We trust each other. We collaborate really well. We're all very commercially minded, and at the same time, we can look at a situation with different perspectives, right? So we've got that cognitive diversity, which I think is extremely important. Our clients, you know, and the clients that we have, I mean, they're all people that we enjoy working with, and they're all people that we respect and people that we admire. It's intellectually stimulating as well, because obviously we can't take clients on where there's a conflict of interest. So our clients will be regtechs, they will be AI technologies, they will be There'll even be sort of very sophisticated market data technologies. So there'll be a real, so we have a real mix in terms of the clients that we'll have cybersecurity clients as well, because of the amount of data now that's out there in financial services, right? So cybersecurity is in huge demand, and it's a very complex field. So we've got a huge variety in terms of the types of clients that we work with, and I think you just have to trust it's a bit, you have to trust your gut, really, and you have to trust your instinct. And it's something that I'd felt, and it's something that I'd felt for enough time for me to then eventually make that decision. So even though everyone else, and then even when I left, they were like, are you sure? This big company, they're looking for an equity trader, maybe you should apply there. And I was like, no, I knew it just wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to change, and I wanted to do something else. And it's also about doing it at the right time in your career, because you don't want to do it too early, you don't want to do it too late. But all of that is sort of very, everyone's career path is very personal. Yeah.
And can you tell me, looking back, so obviously there is also a question about working for a big brand and a big name. What's your take on this now? A lot of people who start their careers are attracted just to that, whether it is a big name, if it is a prestigious firm. But oftentimes they kind of lose track of who they are and what they want, and at some point they feel stuck and don't know kind of what to do next. Like, looking back, what do you think just looking at brands is the right strategy, or should there be something else?
No, it should go deeper than that. It should definitely go deeper than that. I mean, there's one thing. So, and when I say it should go deeper than that, what I mean is, so the particular, because I only ever worked in one place pretty much before Fincellerate, and that particular firm, I think, had some amazing people, and I was very privileged, and I feel very lucky to have worked with them, and I've learned lots from them. And then that particular firm had also given me lots of opportunities, one of them being Fincellerate, sort of in it, obviously they didn't do it directly, clearly, but that has helped a lot now that I'm at Fincellerate, having learned everything that I learned at that previous firm, and have made all those contacts and so on and so forth, and just the skill building aspect and the opportunities and so on, that's helped massively in my current role. So the brand, yes, but there are some brands which don't stand up to what they do, so you have to sort of look deeper than that is what I'm trying to say. So the other aspect is having a brand on your CV does open doors.
Right, yeah. And what advice would you give to people who feel kind of stuck in their careers and want to look for something that they're more passionate about?
But, well, it depends if they know what they're passionate about or not. I think if they know what they're passionate about, then that's, super simple, super easy, because it would just be about talking to those people that have made similar changes, and then understanding how they made those changes and so on and so forth. So I think it's super easy if you know what you're passionate about. If you don't know what you're passionate about, then I think it's just about having those conversations with people, because that's what gets the thoughts, it changes your thought process. You hear different perspectives, and that gives you more ideas. Because that's what it was like for me. It was a process, and it took me a while to get there. And I knew I wanted to do something that was a growing sector, that was exciting. I knew I still wanted to speak to, people that I admired and I respected. So even when I was trying to narrow it down, I mean, they were quite high level things. You could apply those things to lots. But FinTech obviously made sense, given that I came from a trading background anyway.
Amazing, thank you. And last question from my side. What did you learn about transferability of your skills? Obviously, we have touched upon the fact that what you were doing before was very specialized. And many people who are in such roles are thinking, okay, I can only do one thing and my skills are not applicable to anywhere else. So would you say it's a misconception? And how did you see the transferability of your skills playing out?
Oh, it's a huge misconception to only think that you can only do what you do. But I think a lot of people fall into that trap, myself included. And which is why, I had to go through the process, if you like, to understand, well, this is what, the difference between, well, this is what I do, but these are my skills, and that's a completely different list. And that sort of requires like a real mindset change. And I had to, so during one of the many conversations I actually had to have someone spell it out to me and say, listen, if you want to pivot and you want a different career, then you can't sit there listing everything that you used to do in equity trading, because no one's interested, because you want to do something different. And if they don't, and so you're not asking people to hire you as an equity trader. Someone had to spell it out to me. And then once they did, so then it's just that mindset shift about sort of really understanding what it is that you used to do and how you can apply all of those things, and it will open up more doors. And it was all, and then, so that's the first part of the process. And the second part of the process is, well, I've opened up all these doors now, and I don't know which one I want to walk through. And so then that sort of requires another process to work that out as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kenzy, for a super insightful conversation. And I wish you best of luck on your journey ahead.
Excellent. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been wonderful speaking to you.